The problem with someone like Jung is you kind of have to read him as much as you can in the original, because interpreting him is not a very straightforward matter. He was a very visionary person, by which I mean he had an incredible visual imagination, and he used that a lot. He used it in his therapy practice. I believe that most of his therapy clients were high in trait openness. I have a lot of clients who are high in trait openness. They kind of seek me out because I'm high in trait openness, and they watch my videos and that sort of thing, and they're interested in what I'm doing. And many of them are astute dreamers and prolific dreamers. And many open people, in my experience, have archetypal dreams. Whereas people who are lower in openness, they either don't dream at all, or they don't remember their dreams as much, or they're not interested in them, and they're not interested in the mythological underpinnings of them. So I've taught psychology, roughly speaking, to many different types of people, including lawyers and physicians, and they tend to be higher in trait conscientiousness than in openness. And they're much more interested in the practical applications of psychology and maybe the big five theories than they are in the narrative underpinnings. And people say that when they went to Jung, they had Jungian dreams, but I don't, and then when they went to Freud, they had Freudian dreams, and I don't really believe that's exactly true. I think it was a matter of selection bias, a priori selection bias on the part of the people who were likely to go see either of those two. And so, but I've been struck by some clients in particular how unbelievably, continually they can generate deep archetypal dreams with a really coherent narrative structure. It's really phenomenal, and how revealing those dreams are. Problem with archetypal dreams is that they're not really personal, right? So if you're looking for a personal way out of a situation, an archetypal dream doesn't help you that much because it gives you the general pattern rather than a specific solution to your problem. But a good dream will do both at once. So Nietzsche basically stated, let's say explicitly, that scientific empiricism / rationalism had resulted in the death of the mythological tradition of the West, roughly speaking. That's Nietzsche's comment on the death of God. And in that comment, he also said that the fact that God was dead was going to produce tremendous ideational and social, historical upheavals that would result in the deaths of millions of people. That he didn't say all that in one place. It's spread between, part of it's in Will to Power, and I can't remember the source of the other one. Some of it's referenced in Thus Spake Zarathustra. But Nietzsche believed that in order to overcome the collapse of traditional values with the idea, say, of God as its cornerstone, people would have to become creatures that could produce their own values as a replacement, that we would have to become capable of generating autonomous values. And Jung, but that's easier said than done, because trying to impose a set of values on yourself is very difficult because you're not very cooperative. And you know that if you try to get yourself to do something that you don't want to do, or that's hard, you just won't do it. And so it's not like you can just invent your own values and then go along with that. That just doesn't work. And so what Jung and the Freudians did, Freud first, I would say, was to start looking into people's fantasies, autonomous fantasies, unconscious fantasies, to see if they could, and discovered that values bubbled up of their own accord into those fantasies. And you can imagine, for example, if you've become enamored of someone, that you might start fantasizing about them. And if you read off the fantasy, then you can tell what you're after and what you're up to. And so the motivational force composes the fantasy. And Freud was more interested in that in a personal sense. So insofar as your fantasies might reveal your personal history. So for example, if you have a burst of negative emotion in a clinical session, there'll be a fantasy that goes along with that, and an association of ideas that kind of manifest themselves of their own accord, and they're not necessarily coherent and logical. They're linked by emotion. That's the free association technique in Freudian psychology. And they also might manifest themselves in dreams and fantasies. And so Freud started doing the analysis of these spontaneous, let's call them fantasies, and Jung linked that more. Freud did this first with the Oedipal complex, but then Jung linked up spontaneous fantasies and dreams with mythology and fantasy across history. And of course, Piaget did the same thing from a completely different standpoint. So, and then a lot of that's embedded in this movie, so we might as well just walk through it. So the first question might be, well, why is a lion a king, right? And because it makes sense to people that a lion could be a king. And of course, a lion is an apex predator, and so, which means it's at the top of the food chain, roughly speaking, and it's sort of golden like the sun, so that's also useful. And it has that mane that makes it look majestic, and of course, it's very physically powerful, and it's intimidating. And so it's something that you run away from as well, right? Or you're awestruck by. So the fact that, you know, it's like Snail King just doesn't make any sense, right? But Lion King, that works. And you got to think about those things, because it's not self-evident why a lion would work as a king, but a snail wouldn't. But it fits in with your metaphorical understanding of the way the world works much better. And so the Lion King makes sense. And when things like that aren't rationally self-evident make sense, you have to ask yourself, in what metaphorical context do they make sense? So you have the Lion King. Now the movie opens with a sunrise, and the sunrise is equivalent to the dawn of consciousness, so that in many archaic stories, the sun was a hero, like Horus, if I remember correctly, was a solar king, but Apollo in particular, but Apollo, Greek myth. The idea was that the sun was the hero who illuminated the sky in the day. And so heroism and illumination and enlightenment are all tangled together metaphorically. And then at night, what would happen would be that the sun would fight with the dragon of darkness, basically, or with evil all night, and then rise again victorious in the morning. And so it's a death and rebirth theme, and it's very, 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 very common mythological theme. And the reason the sun is associated with consciousness, as far as I can tell, is that we're not nocturnal creatures, right? We're awake during the day, and we're very, very visual. Half our brain is devoted to visual processing. And to be enlightened and illuminated means to move towards a higher state of consciousness, and we naturally use light symbolism to represent that, you know, like the light bulb on the top of someone's head. You know, you don't say, I was darkened when you learn something new. And so again, that fits into this underlying metaphorical substrate that's, I think, deeply biologically grounded, but also socially grounded. So it's a new day, it's the start of a new day, and a day actually means, like French, journée, means day, the day trek in some sense. And how to comport yourself during the day is the fundamental question. The day is the canonical unit of time. And so you have to know how to comport yourself during the day. And part of that is a journey from consciousness into unconsciousness, and that return. So like Apollo, you descend into unconsciousness and then re-emerge. And of course, that's not metaphorical at all. That's exactly what you do. You descend into the underworld of darkness and dreams, and strange things happen down there. And then you awake, if you're fortunate or unfortunate, depending on your state of mind, you awake in the morning and it's a new day, right? And so the dream world seems to help you sort out your thoughts, by the way. If you keep people awake for an extended period of time, then they lose their minds, essentially. The unconsciousness and the dream state seem absolutely critical in the maintenance of mental health, although people don't exactly understand why. It looks like dreams might help you forget, because forgetting is really important. You just can't remember everything that happened to you. You get so damn cluttered that you'd fall apart. And so you reduce things to the gist, and when you're doing that, you pack them in. It's like you compress them in some sense. You pack them into a smaller space and get rid of everything that isn't relevant. And the dream seems to not be part of that. It also seems to be a place where you deeply encode learning that might have been done that day, which is something that Freud actually noted in his interpretation of dreams, which is a great book. If you're ever going to read a book that Freud wrote, The Interpretation of Dreams is the proper one to read. In my estimation, it's a brilliant book. And it laid the groundwork for a lot of what Jung did. And so anyways, that's how the movie starts, and the animals come out into the light, and that's a metaphor for the dawning of consciousness, to come out into the light where you can see. And so this is a baby giraffe, and babies emerge into the light, roughly speaking, and that's like I said, that's a representation of the emergence or expansion of consciousness. And so this is how the movie starts.